I've come to the point in my life where you shouldn't listen to what everyone has to say. And what I mean by that is what most people say with their statistics saying about, oh, Gen Z or millennials won't be able to afford a home until they're 40 or 50. Or they say things like Gen Z and millennials are going back to church or going to church at a rapid rate, or certain statistics that even say that inflation's through the roof, or even the news when they say certain things about Trump, or don't say things as much as something should be, or vice versa. People will say things that these influencers are where we should receive truth from and no one else. People think that all this stuff that if they just only receive the truth from a person's mouth, then that's where they're only able to obtain knowledge and understanding. It may be hard for me to explain, but simply put, I'm at the point in my life where I've started to just not accept what most people say. Because the thing is, how is it that somehow people are listening to data and statistics about how supposedly, and I'll use this as an example, how the short population, like 14% of the U.S. population is black, and supposedly they commit 55% of the crimes in America, and some people have said, well, the reason for that is because there's no fathers in the home. And some people will even believe that statistic and say, they'll believe that statistic and they'll just keep themselves in victimhood and think, oh, well, if I'm black, then I'm a criminal then. And then they live their life as a criminal. Or they'll believe the lies, and I'm just saying anyone in general, where if you just smoke pot, then you're not going to get cancer, you're not going to have any health defects. And they'll use data to try and sway the person saying, you're not going to die from a heart attack or get cancer. And they'll even use the living name of Jesus, that if God put this plant on this earth, then it is for me to use. And you know what happened? The data of what that was showing newer data, which obviously this would make sense because this is going to be a new thing that's going to be to come. And the Lord, at the time I didn't realize it, but now I do, is that God can make something that wouldn't give you an effect of like a health defect, can speak to that individual plant or situation of what that may be that you're in, and make it into a negative outcome. Because now people that use marijuana to relaxation or just to get high, now will have heart defects or risk of a lot of problems with their health, and that is a bad thing. Obviously, marijuana is a psychedelic drug and can open the door for demons. I actually heard a testimony, well, not necessarily a testimony, but a story where one girl that I worked with for a day at one of the stores that I worked with at KFC when I worked with them at the time, they said that some guy saw like a demon morph out of her face or manifest out of her face, basically seeing the second realm, if you get what I'm saying. So, or in this case where if I get. I guess you can say even like I'm not sure if I made this example, and forgive me if I'm repeating myself. This subject is very strong with me right now in my mind, but where supposedly the statistic goes where Gen Z and millennials are having a hard time trying to buy a home, and supposedly something just doesn't add up where somehow they are making money, but however they're buying more than and saving less. Now, I'll even personally admit that I had a problem. I have a problem with that too. And you should be spending less and saving more. Now, it's not a sin to save money. And some people can go legalistic and abuse what's written in the Bible and say, oh, because the scriptures say you can't save up money, then you can't save money. But if you save money, that's a sin. That's the word of God. And the thing is that when people in statistics say, it's hard for Gen Z and millennials to get a home because they're not making enough money, unlike how the boomers and whoever, they had the money then, and they rigged the system and blah, blah, blah. And the thing is, it's like, do you hear the fruits that's coming out of people's mouths? Even the people that hear this, they speak what they speak, but they don't want to put the change in their actions, or like this. They're not willing to spend less and then save more. They're not willing, or they're more willing to speak against it, but not put the work into it, if that makes sense. And even with lies that I've heard, this one lie I've known for quite a while now is these revival events involving millennials and Gen Z. Now the statistics, or what Fox News or these influencers that are conservative but also have Christian values, or are Christian, I guess you can say, they're saying there's a revival going on. There's a revival. But the one major disconnect is, how in the world can you say that? But then the very same people that are influencers that claim revival are also saying and speaking about things that people bully each other, and they make fun and sport out of it. This one example, I'll say, a man named Benny Johnson at a conference in Phoenix, Arizona at, I think, Turning Point USA, where I think Ben Shapiro spoke against Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, and supposedly, and then he said something against Megyn Kelly, and then eventually Megyn Kelly goes out on the floor and was kind of just shocked at what happened, or was behind stage. I don't remember exactly, but then eventually Benny Johnson goes out there, I think that's his name. He's like saying, hey everyone, and then he was like making fun and sport out of what just happened, of how everybody's kind of going at each other or whatever over the Israel and Palestine stuff, or just all that stuff that Ben Shapiro was speaking against everybody, or half of everybody, and he's like basically making fun and sport out of it, and everybody's kind of chiming in, and then goes along with saying, yeah, this is great about like this revival that happened a few months ago. And the truth is, the very same people that say these things, claiming revival and receiving revival, These people do not know what revival is because they've never experienced it. And these revival events you should avoid 100% because I could not find myself walking in there. And if I do, it's for me to observe and not partake in the vain worship that everyone else is committing. Not that I'm trying to be physically better or to be better than everyone else. That is not my intention. But like I said, I'm not going to partake in vain worship because I was once part of that. I tried to, in 2020, I tried to be that type of person. And I know how vain it is and how showy it is, how not real it is. And I'm really being truthful when I tell you this, is that you can't just, I guess you can say, sorry, it's hard for me to put that into words, but essentially, it's all a lie with worship in church because it really is just for show. Because they think that if you just outwardly present your faith before others, then you are truly a Christian. You are truly a follower of Jesus. And it has to happen only in church. And if it's not, then you're basically not a Christian. And I've had people personally attack me verbally over this. And it really stings and hurts to hear people that I care about and say, Nick, you're not really a Christian if you don't go to church, or if supposedly if you don't sing during worship during church, then that just means you're trying to be better than everyone else. And when I was told that, I was completely just blown away when I heard that. And there's so many other things that I've heard involving when I've spoken out against the false Christianity that many practice anyway, especially when it comes to conservatives who have Christian values, and some are Christians and some are, Catholic, all these other church denominations, and they all have different perspective of Jesus and all different doctrines of Jesus. But they all want to say, or some will say, yeah, but we're talking about Jesus. We all follow the same God. You may say that, but you're lying to yourself, or you're listening to a lie that is not true at all. Which in itself, a lie is not true, so there you go. All in all, I'm starting to not buy the lies that what people are saying about how, like some of the things on the news, even if something is objectively true, let's just say, it's still a lie, because how will you know? How would you know? Like, let's use this for example. Let's say for example, sex outside of marriage. It may feel good, and of course it will feel good, but is it pleasing to God? No, it is not. Just because it's objectively true doesn't mean it's good for you. Or let's say if you drink bleach, let's use an extreme example. It may have like no taste, or may have a funky taste. Oh, well, I'm not going to have an issue with it. Well, 30 minutes to an hour, you could either be dead or on your way to the hospital to get your stomach pumped and having bleach getting out of your system. Or, this is an example that my dad actually has used before when I've mentioned this subject, the subject that I'm talking about now. So, it may feel good if you're driving 100 miles an hour on the interstate, and you may have a really good adrenaline going. But then when you pass a cop car and that cop car reads what the radar gun has, you're gonna have a big consequence. Is either you're getting a criminal citation or a ticket, or you're going to the county or city jail, and you're getting booked. So there's that, and that fast driving may feel good, but it's gonna have a consequence. And I've actually had that ticket consequence before, not because I thought, oh, it felt good driving fast, but really I was just trying to pass a car of how I got a ticket, and luckily they didn't see the other part of the speed that I went. Obviously I got the consequence of getting a ticket, and they gave me not a criminal citation, but just a plain ticket that I could just pay online, and that was, great. And obviously I got a consequence from the boss, but he gave me a chance of redemption, and I showed that redemption, and I'm still here today, a year later. But more to the point with everything that I'm saying is that lies are so decorated in objective truth, or lying words or statistics can even be decorated in those statistics. Like, lies can be so convincing as if it is true, but it really has to take an act of God. It really has to take an act of God to convince you that something is not true. And I really just can't express this enough, is that recently, like, I've even spoken this about my parents, that I'm just starting not to believe with, and I'll use this as a testimony too, because this is something I wanted to bring up too, but I've been waiting a while to speak about this because I wasn't sure myself. But a lot of people speak really badly about Chicago here in the United States or in America. And while, yes, it is bad for the state's governor to make sport or a joke saying, oh yeah, I'm in the battle zone Chicago, and literally has a bulletproof vest on, and just to make a mockery against the Trump administration or law enforcement that's trying to, dial down crime, which, of course, yes, high populated cities do have crime. Where I live, there is crime, and of course you see homeless people walking around, or kind of sketchy people here and there, but as some people say, if you mind your business, then they won't mess with you. And that's kind of true, but the thing is that when God calls you to do something, to then, get in someone's business, then you have to get involved. Now, it's not always like that every time. But anyways, people always want to say that people, just a lot of people in Chicago are just bad, or the crime here is just so high that it's not worth going, or just stuff like that. And I've been in Chicago at least 6 to 7 times. 2 times generally in 2 times generally in November, and then for almost about a month, excluding 1 week, because I was at home from work. And I'm going to be really bluntly honest with you, is that I am here to tell you is that Chicago is not that bad. Now, of course, Chicago Heights is sketchy, and the heart of West Side Chicago, mainly in the neighborhoods, is where it really is sketchy, and it's very run down. And I would probably advise people not to just go on a walk there, of course. Now, if you're someone that lives there and you're only able to live there because of that's what you're able to afford, then don't think that you're condemned because you live in that area. The man in I believe it's the book of Genesis, where Abraham, he had a family member where they would have went to, or they were going to Sodom and Gomorrah. I can't think of the man's name, but he was a righteous man. And he still went there, and he was in agony because of all the wickedness that happened in Sodom and Gomorrah. But anyways, what I'm getting at about the Chicago thing is that yes, it is bad for it is bad that you have a governor that's making mockery of the supposed crime that someone is saying that, yeah, it's bad and whatever. But also at the same time, you shouldn't be really saying that, oh, Chicago's dangerous because look at all these shootings that happened. And somebody actually in Chicago, I can't remember where, but I remember that supposedly someone said to me that, if you compare, about 1 million or 3 million compared to like a small number of people that got shot or injured, then the odds of something I think, I would hope you get to understand what I'm saying, but basically you don't want to have the fear and anxiety of other people's words to affect your daily life, because that's essentially how Satan works. Is that even back in November, I thought, oh man, I'm gonna be in Chicago. It's gonna be sketchy. I'm gonna be very vigilant because I've always heard that Chicago's dangerous. And then after all these sites that I had, these cell phone tower sites that I routine maintenance, the only places that I can say is that the heart of West Side Chicago and Chicago Heights, sketchy. Just blunt out sketchy. But anywhere else in the surrounding Chicago area, even in Chicago itself, downtown Chicago, not sketchy at all. And I even went to supposedly the Navy Pier, where that, if many of you know, many of us millions in Chicago saw nothing but colorful fog and low-level fireworks because the fog was so dense. Many millions of people, and I'll actually bring up what I was actually going to also bring up involving Chicago and just lies in general, is that many of us didn't even get to see a fireworks show. And beforehand, actually, the Lord actually, and I didn't know at the time, but later I figured, no, it was the Lord, because the Lord spoke to my heart and said that there would be fog tonight. And my goodness, that fog was really dense. Like you can just barely see, like at a distance, like probably about a mile. And not only that, but the visibility height was maybe at least 200, 300 feet. So whatever launched above 300 feet in the air was nothing but just like a flash color of the firework that it was, of whatever, metal material it was. But anything below 300 or whatever feet, you could see it. And then, after everybody left because of the disappointment of, no fireworks show in Chicago, everybody left with disappointment. But then people, and this was really interesting, is that people were launching fireworks in the middle of downtown, in the river area where I think the Chicago River is. And what was so interesting is that people were launching fireworks, and obviously, that's kind of probably a normal thing in Chicago, where on the 4th of July, people are just going to launch fireworks. But one thing that I noticed is that people were just, they were launching fireworks, and I know I'm repeating that again and again. But the crazy thing is that later the next day, or 2 days later, I see a conservative post that showed people launching fireworks at the Trump International Hotel, or the Trump Tower that's in downtown Chicago, right there at the Chicago River, and they were saying communist people are launching firework, or it's communist liberals or something like that. They said that they're launching fireworks at the hotel. These people need to be arrested now. And the reason why that these people were thinking this way is because the liberals hate Trump, so they want to defame the name of Trump by launching fireworks. Well, if any of you have heard of reality distortion field, of course, yes, people that hold liberal values have a reality distortion field, but conservatives, or conservatives that have Christian values, really have a reality distortion field. And with that in mind, it became to me that I realized it to be a lie, because I was there in Chicago. Now, I wasn't there for them launching fireworks at the tower itself when that video was taken. But when I saw the video, or when I was at downtown Chicago, people were actually in their cars launching fireworks, or just shooting streamer fireworks, or whatever it was. And there was even people on the lakeside of the highway launching fireworks too. So it almost seems like to me that people are just launching fireworks because, it's the 4th of July. Now, of course, you shouldn't launch fireworks at a building because, the glass could break and then a room can catch on fire. And what's so sad is people have really gotten on the deep end thinking that, the reason why they're launching fireworks at a specific building is because they just don't like Trump. It honestly doesn't matter, because the truth is that it just becomes a distraction. It really does. Now, if that was their intention, shame on them. But the intention of that photo, from what I saw, was something that I just couldn't ignore, because I knew it to not be true, just along with everything else that I've spoken about. And honestly, with even just like little other miscuous things that I've even thought of like over the years, is that where I've even been told by whether it be family or even friends, where people think that, well, the only way if you're gonna find a godly woman is only in church. And that's not necessarily true, because you can be a plumber who is a follower of Christ, and you can literally go to the store and just run into your soon-to-be wife, or vice versa. You could be a person that does like style people's hair, or I can't think of the correct term for the name, but basically like a hairstylist, and she can end up running into a man that she likes, and they get married one day. Like, people think that godliness can only be found in church, and that's a really bad reality of that's a really bad that's a real bad thing to say, because if godliness can only be found in churches, then what more lies could they say as well? Because godliness can't be found in a place anywhere, because that's just not true. Godliness can only be found in someone, in a person, if they are willing to follow and obey Jesus. That's where godliness is found. So, will you listen to the white lies or just lies in general and think that they are truth? Or will you listen to Jesus and really listen to him and adhere to what he has to say and show you what is true and what is not true? I pray and hope that this message, if you've watched it this long, opens you up to the truth. May Jesus Christ bless you guys.